It's one of the least expensive ways to lift your Jeep Wrangler. But are coil spacers junk? And what are the real pros and cons of going with such an inexpensive kit? Well, today we're going to dive right into all of that. Okay, let's break down what a coil spacer is. Now, all a coil spacer is designed to do is sit on top of a coil. This is what's going to provide you with lift. Now, there's usually two types. You can either have a steel one, which is what we have here, or you'll get one that's like a polyethylene or a polyurethane that will go atop the coil. All serve the same purpose, but we're seeing more and more suspension manufacturers go to this steel style. Now, the advantage of the steel styles, they're pretty inexpensive for the manufacturer to make. A lot of these guys are made in-house, so they don't have to sub them out. And the beauty is they're not going to collapse or sag over time. Now, the advantage of this is you are going to maintain your factory spring rate. So, if you like how your Jeep rides and drives, then this is probably a good way to go. Most of these kits don't even come with shocks. What you're going to get instead is a shock spacer. Now, I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but what you really need to know here is if you like the way your vehicle drives and you like the way it rides from the factory, going with a coil spring spacer is essentially going to preserve that. Now, if you do not like how your vehicle rides from the factory and you feel that it's too stiff or too soft, then a coil spring spacer is not going to help with that. All it's going to do is raise your vehicle and basically keep the same ride quality that you already have. Now, let's talk a little bit more about who this coil spring spacer was originally intended for. Now, as I mentioned, it is a very inexpensive way to lift your vehicle. That's obviously a good thing, but the concept here is to get the vehicle raised so you can run a larger tire. Now, this 2017 Jeep Wrangler Unlimited Sport behind me, I actually already put a 35-inch tall tire on with no lift. Wanted to see if you could do it. It definitely works, but it rubs. Now, the owner of this Jeep wanted to get it up a little bit more so that they didn't like the full stuffed appearance of the tire inside of the wheel well, so this is going to get a little bit more clearance for that. That being said, this is not necessarily designed to be a super hardcore suspension kit, and the reason for that is mostly because it doesn't come with a ton of components. Now, you're looking at a $200 lift kit. That is what it retails for. That's what we paid for it. That's really inexpensive to lift a vehicle 2.5 inches. That's fantastic. There's a catch though. You're not going to get all of those little components and pieces that you sometimes really need if you're going to go, let's say, rock crawl or go hit the Rubicon Trail or go out in the desert real fast with your buddies. So what are these pieces? Well, first off, you're not going to get bump stop extensions. This means the shock and coil is going to be responsible for managing the up travel of the suspension, which often can put too much stress on the shock and equate to either the coil going to coil binder or the shock itself becoming damaged. So bump stop spacers are a big deal. They also prevent the tire from traveling too far up into the wheel well. So even though we know this 35-inch tire rubs as it sits with mild articulation, just because we're adding 2.5 inches of lift doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to rub at extreme articulation. The reason being, we're not stopping where that bump stop is intended to hit the axle. Now, again, this kit is designed for more, I hate to say it, but you want to call it mall crawler, someone that just wants a taller lift so they can put the larger tire on here. This kit today, I'm going to toss on. I'm not going to walk you through it. It is a very easy kit. Put the Jeep on jack stands, unbolt the shocks, drop the coils out, put the spacers in. These rear ones actually bolt through to the factory bucket. Not much to it. If you're doing this at home, absolutely do it with confidence. There's not anything terribly difficult about putting on a spacer lift, so don't feel like this is something that you can't do. A couple things that's worth noting. Now, I mentioned the shock spacers before. Now, these spacers are designed to give you the adequate, make the stock shocks essentially long enough for your new 2.5-inch lift. Now, I happen to have another set of these Fox Adventure Series shocks that are designed for a 2.5-inch JK lift. Now, I was curious, well, let's see exactly what it looks like compared to these with these spacers they send. And it is exactly the same length. So, Rough Country, good job on that. You know, the idea with that I think is really positive, because what you can essentially do is, if you just want to get into getting an inexpensive lift kit, and the coil spacers are going to allow you to do that, and if you find, hey, I'm going to add aftermarket tire carrier or bumper or winch, and now maybe my shocks aren't keeping up, I'm blowing through it off-road, you can just bolt on a set of shocks a little bit later down the road. So you can kind of build, make yourself have like a builder kit and just buy what you need, and as you need other stuff, you can do it. Maybe the biggest disadvantage of a coil spring spacer over a coil is that you are maintaining that factory coil, which means if you've upgraded your front end with, say, a bumper and a winch, and these stock coils are already starting to collapse, well, just putting in the spacer is going to give you a little bit of lift, but that coil is already going to be condensed quite a bit. Now, going with a aftermarket coil, a lot of times you're going to get a 2-stage or a multiple rate coil, and what that's going to do is give you that really tight wind at the top that allows you to have nice droopy travel, so this thing can get a little bit more articulation, but still give you a good ride on road and off, so it's not all over the place. Now, you're not going to get that with a spacer, and you know, again, this goes back into what type of performance that you're really looking for out of your suspension. If you're not going rock crawling and you're not doing a lot of off-roading, these coil spacer kits really are a good solution. It's very inexpensive. For the same price that you might pay for a more advanced series, you know, 2.5-inch lift, you can sometimes just buy a set of coil spacers and you'll have enough money left over for a new set of tires and wheel spacers. You know, it really depends on how far you want to go with your budget and what you're going to do with the vehicle. Now, in terms of overall driving and handling, it's not significantly different. Now, we did upgrade it with our used Fox shocks, and that did firm it up a little bit, which is nice. It kind of took away some of that floatiness that this Jeep had out of the gate. Obviously, with these 35-inch tall ridge grapplers that were already on it, we knew how these were going to ride and drive, which they're super quiet, which you probably can't tell because it's a soft top and there's plenty of wind noise. In terms of overall handling, it definitely could probably use either lower control arms or cam bolts. In my experience, anytime you get to 2.5 inches of lift, you've got to have one of those two things to get the caster right. This kit did not include that, but you can option it from Rough Country. Driving down the road, going 55 right now, it drives and handles just fine. It's not super darty one way or the other. I went ahead and adjusted the drag link to get the steering wheel back where it needed to be. The Jeep has been calibrated for the tires. I know when we initially did the 35s and no lift, we didn't have one. It now has a AEV Pro Cal, so it is set up for the 35s, which has really helped with the shift points on the Jeep. Another thing worth mentioning is Rough Country builds this out to essentially level the Jeep. So it's a 2.5-inch front spacer with a 2-inch rear spacer, and that gives you that nice flat, you know, appearance where the Jeep is level from front to rear. Now, if you end up going with like say a winch front bumper or something like that, it'll bring it down a little bit. I personally like my Jeeps just a touch nose low in the front. That's just a personal preference. Overall, really, you know, if you want a very inexpensive way to get 2.5 inches of lift, this is a really good option. You know, not all spacer lifts are created equal. Not all spacer lifts are the same. This is definitely a super entry level one, but if you are going for that, hey, I just want to get a little bit of lift, I want to do it myself, kind of get my hands dirty, figure out really what I want to do with the Jeep, this is a great entry point. I mean, we're talking $200 to get you 2.5 inches of lift. You know, 2.5 inches of lift in terms of suspension kits on the market, they vary wildly. You can have thousands of dollars in a 2.5 inch kit, and I'm not saying it's not worth it. There are some legit amazing suspension kits out there that will allow you crazy amount of travel. You can haul butt in the desert and rock crawl and all that good stuff and daily drive with no problems. This is more intended for someone that just wants to lift their vehicle, and there's nothing wrong with that. So wanted to dive into spacer lifts. They really get a bad rap, but they're overall not that bad. We've got some more Jeep tech videos on the way. We've got some cool Gladiator content, some JL content, and JK content. Please be sure to subscribe. We hope you like the channel. We got really cool guys that are kind of coming on, and gals, that are going to be doing some new vlog series stuff. So be sure to subscribe. Let us know what you think. You can always find me at Ollie Mansour Editor on Instagram, and that's about the only thing I'm really active on social media. But if you got any questions, let me know. Hope you like the video, and bye bye.